Today I want us to remember Martin Luther King Jr. I hope I'm correct in assuming that we all know who Dr. King was. We know that he was a great champion of civil rights, a peace-loving activist who fought for justice against hate and ignorance, a martyr to the cause of values we cherish today as a free people. When we think of him, his stirring "I have a dream" speech should come to mind. Today I'm going to share his words with you. Not "I have a dream," but words he wrote some 4 months earlier. In the spring of 1963, when I was a senior in high school, Dr. King was in jail in Birmingham, Alabama. He had gone to Birmingham to organize the city's black population in peaceful resistance to the segregationist system that deliberately denied African Americans their rights as citizens and prevented their full participation in the economic and public life of the city. As his activities involved civil disobedience to city laws and regulations, he was arrested and imprisoned. A group of well-meaning Christian clergymen, both black and white, alarmed that Dr. King's activities might provoke racial unrest and violence, publicly called his visit to the city unwise and untimely. They saw his activities as extremist and were, in effect, asking him to leave Birmingham. In reflection on their concern, he responded. Using scraps of paper given him by a fellow prisoner, he wrote his letter from a Birmingham jail. It was an open letter that would later be published. It is dated April 16, 1963. Time prohibits my reading the entire letter. Therefore, I will just read excerpts. And this is what he wrote. There can be no gainsaying the fact that racial injustice engulfs this community. Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of brutality is widely known. Negroes have experienced grossly unjust treatment in the courts. There have been more unsolved bombings of Negro homes and churches in Birmingham than in any other city in the nation. These are the hard, brutal facts of the case. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well-timed, in view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I have heard the word "wait." It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This "wait" has almost always meant never. We must come to see, with one of our distinguished jurists, that justice too long delayed is justice denied. We have waited more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward gaining political independence, but we still creep at horse and buggy pace toward gaining a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, "Wait." But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, "Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?" When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are humiliated day in and day out by the nagging signs reading white and colored. When your first name becomes nigger, your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected title, Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly a tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments. When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. You speak of our activity in Birmingham as extreme. At first, I was rather disappointed that fellow clergymen would see my nonviolent efforts as those of an extremist. But though I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. Was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies, he said. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Was not the prophet Amos an extremist for justice when he said, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream? Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel when he said, I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus? Was not Martin Luther an extremist when he said, here I stand, I can do no other, so help me God? And Abraham Lincoln, this nation cannot survive half slave and half free. And Thomas Jefferson, when he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? In that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified. We must never forget that all 3 were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists for immorality. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness. Perhaps the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. I have no despair about the future. I have no fear about the outcome of our struggle in Birmingham, even if our motives are at present misunderstood. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. For more than 2 centuries, our forebears labored in this country without wages. They made cotton king. They built the homes of their masters while suffering gross injustice and shameful humiliation. And yet, out of bottomless vitality, they continue to thrive and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands. So there, in a Birmingham jail, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us of our obligation as a people to the promise of our nation. Today, we need only